They thought I didn't notice. That was their first mistake. I'd been gone for 11 days. A conference in Portland, 3 days of meetings, then a week visiting my college roommate out in Bend because his wife had just passed and he needed someone there. I didn't call ahead when I changed my flight home. I just wanted to walk through my own front door, pour myself a glass of water from my own kitchen, and sit in my own chair. 63 years old, and that's all I wanted. My house. My quiet. My wife. I pulled into the driveway around 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The street was peaceful. Maple trees just starting to turn. I sat in the car for a minute just looking at the house, the one I'd bought in 1991, the one where we brought both our kids home from the hospital, the one I'd repainted 4 times and re-roofed once, and spent 30 years making into something I was proud of. There was an unfamiliar SUV in the driveway, a big silver thing, new, with a Colorado plate. I figured my son and his wife had company. I didn't think much of it. I came in through the side door the way I always do, left my bag in the mudroom. And that's when I heard it, my wife's voice, low, shaking. She wasn't talking. She was crying. I walked into the living room and found her sitting alone on the couch, hunched forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper in both hands. She didn't even hear me come in. She was somewhere far away, and from the kitchen, from my kitchen, I could hear laughter. My son's voice, his wife's voice, and 2 other voices I recognized immediately. Her parents. Not a worried laugh, not a polite laugh. A comfortable laugh, the kind of laugh people make when they feel at home. "Honey," I said. She looked up and I saw her face, red, wet, exhausted, and something cold moved through me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter and more serious than anger. "You're back," she said, like she couldn't believe it. "I came home early." I crossed the room and sat next to her. "What happened?" She shook her head, looked down at the paper in her hands. I took it gently. She let me. It was a printed floor plan, our house, with handwritten notes in the margins. One of them said master bedroom, open wall to expand in handwriting I didn't recognize. Another said kitchen, full gut, move island. There was a circle around the room we'd always used as my home office. Someone had written bonus room nursery option next to it. I sat very still. "Where did you get this?" I asked. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I found it on the dining room table this morning. They'd left it out. I don't think they meant for me to see it." From the kitchen, another burst of laughter. I set the floor plan down on the coffee table. I straightened it, like that mattered. I looked at my wife. She looked like she'd been holding something terrible by herself all morning, and was exhausted from the weight of it. "How long have they been here?" I said. "They arrived yesterday afternoon. Our son said they were just visiting. That they wanted to see the house. See the house. Not visit us, see the house." I stood up. I walked into the kitchen. My son was leaning against the counter, my counter, with a coffee mug in his hand. His wife was at the table with her mother. Her father was standing by the window that looks out over the backyard, the one I'd replaced the frame on 2 summers ago. He had his arms crossed, looking out at the yard like he was measuring it. They all went quiet when I walked in. My son said, "Dad, I didn't know you were coming home today." "I know," I said. Nobody said anything for a moment. I looked at my son's father-in-law. He's a tall man, mid-60s, runs a commercial real estate company in Denver. We'd met maybe a dozen times over the years. We'd always been polite to each other. I'd never had any reason to be anything else. He cleared his throat and said, "Good trip." "It was fine," I said. "What are you all doing here?" My son set down his coffee mug. "We were just talking about some ideas." "What kind of ideas?" His wife looked at her mother looked at her father looked at me, and my son said, "Dad, sit down. We've been wanting to talk to you anyway." I stayed standing. He sighed. This was a sigh I recognized, the one he used when he thought I was being difficult. He'd been doing it since he was 16. "We've been thinking about the future, your future. You and Mom aren't getting any younger, and this house is a lot to manage." "I manage it fine. Dad, I manage it fine," I said again. "I re-caulked the windows last spring. I cleaned the gutters in September. I have a lawn service that costs me $40 a month and does exactly what I need." "That's not what I mean." He glanced at his father-in-law. Something passed between them. "We've been talking about the possibility of you and Mom transitioning to something more manageable, a smaller place. Maybe a community where you'd have a facility," I said. "It's not like that." "Is that what the floor plan is about?" Silence. "Did you have someone draft a floor plan for my house before you talked to me?" My son's father-in-law said, smooth as anything. "It was just exploratory. We know a contractor." I didn't ask you, I said. The room went very quiet. He wasn't used to being spoken to that way. I could see it on his face. I didn't especially care. I looked at my son who I had coached through Little League and helped move 4 times and who I had lent money to without counting. My son, who was standing in my kitchen looking at the floor like a teenager who'd been caught. Come find me when you're ready to have a real conversation, I said. Just you and me. I walked back to the living room, sat down next to my wife. She was still holding herself like she was bracing for something. It's all right, I told her, even though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. That night, after her parents had gone to their hotel and the house was quiet, my son came and found me in my office. I was sitting at my desk. I wasn't reading. I was thinking. He sat down in the chair across from me, the one I'd had since before he was born. He looked like he was 36 years old trying to look 45, which is exactly what he was. I know how this looked, he said. How did it look? Dad, tell me how you think it looked, I said. I want to know if we're seeing the same thing. He rubbed his face with both hands. Her parents they've been pushing this for a while. The idea of the house. They think it could be developed, that the lot is worth significantly more than what I paid for it, than what the house itself is worth. The lot is almost an acre in a neighborhood that's changing. A developer would, this is my home. He stopped. I've lived here for 32 years, I said. Your sister learned to ride a bike in that driveway. Your mother planted those roses in the side yard the summer her mother died because she needed something to do with her hands. I know every sound this house makes. I know which step creaks and which window sticks, and where the water pressure drops. This isn't a lot. This is my home. He looked at the floor. I know, do you? He didn't answer. Does your wife know you're in here talking to me? He shook his head slightly. Her dad thinks we should let the lawyers talk first. Let the lawyers talk first. I made note of that. What does your wife think? A long pause. She thinks whatever her father thinks. That was the most honest thing he'd said all evening. I told him to go to bed. He went. What my son didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been thinking about the future for a long time. Just not the same future they were thinking about. I should back up. My father was a stubborn, proud, mostly wonderful man who died with nothing because he believed that taking care of his own business meant not telling anyone about it. He had a modest savings account and a life insurance policy that barely covered his debts. When he died, my mother spent the next 4 years terrified, and then she died too. And I spent a long time after that angry, not at my parents, but at the situation, at the way things can just unravel when no one's prepared. So I prepared. I started working with an estate attorney about 12 years ago. A woman named Harriet who had an office above a dry cleaner downtown and who was smarter about this kind of thing than anyone I'd ever met. We set up a revocable living trust. We structured it carefully. The house was in the trust. My investments were in the trust. There was a provision. Harriet had called it a protective clause that addressed specifically what would happen if a beneficiary took any action against the interests of the trust or the trust's primary beneficiaries, meaning me and my wife, while we were still living. I'd never told my son about the trust. I'd meant to, someday, when it felt right, but I'd also always had a feeling, a faint one I'd never said out loud because I didn't want to believe it, that knowing about it might change things. Might change how he treated us, might change what he was actually after. I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. Now I was finding out anyway. The next morning I woke up early, made coffee, and called Harriet. She listened while I told her what had happened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Did they actually attempt to enter into any agreement, sign anything, contact anyone officially regarding the property?" My son said they were letting the lawyers talk first. She was quiet again. "All right, let me make some calls. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a vindictive person. I've never liked conflict. I spent 35 years as a civil engineer, and the thing I liked best about that work was solving problems quietly. You find out where the stress is, where the weakness is, and you address it. You don't blow up the bridge, you fix it. What I wanted, what I genuinely wanted, was for my son to walk into that kitchen that morning and say, 'Dad, I'm sorry. This got away from me. I should have protected you instead of going along with this.' I made enough coffee for everyone. I sat at the kitchen table and read the paper the way I do every morning. I waited. My son came down first. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from me without saying anything. His wife came down next. She looked at me and then looked at the table. She was a woman who'd once been warm to me, genuinely warm, I think, and somewhere over the past few years something had shifted. I didn't know exactly when. I suspected it had something to do with how often her parents visited. "Good morning," I said. She said good morning back. Then her parents arrived. They must have come over early from the hotel. Her father walked in wearing a pressed shirt like he was going to a meeting. Her mother smiled at me in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Her father sat down across from me and put both hands flat on the table and said, "I hope we can have a productive conversation today." "I hope so too," I said. "I want to be straightforward with you," he said. "We've had someone look at the lot. I have a development contact who's very interested. I think we could facilitate a sale that would give you and your wife real financial security for the rest of your lives. We'd take care of everything. You wouldn't have to manage a thing. We'd take care of everything." I noticed the we. "And where would we live?" I asked. "There are several excellent communities in the area. Retirement communities. They prefer active living communities. My wife is 61 years old," I said. "She gardens. She walks 3 miles a day. She volunteers at the library on Thursdays. She doesn't need an active living community. She needs her home." He smiled patiently, the smile of a man who has talked slower people into things many times. "I understand the emotional attachment. I really do. But sometimes what we need and what's best for us aren't the same." "Are you familiar with the term revocable living trust?" I said. He stopped. "Because the property you've been having drafted and measured and evaluated isn't mine to sell." I took a sip of my coffee. "It's held in trust. Has been for 12 years. And the trust has some fairly specific language about what happens when a beneficiary, or a beneficiary's associate, takes action contrary to the interests of the trust." The kitchen was very quiet. "That's not possible," her father said. He said it the way people say things they want to be true. "You're welcome to have your attorney look into it," I said. "I'd be happy to have Harriet send over the relevant documents." My son had gone very still. "The clause in question," I said, "is straightforward. Any beneficiary who makes, joins, or supports an attempt to transfer, encumber, modify, or otherwise act on trust assets without the consent of the living trustees, without my and your mother's consent, is removed, not suspended, remove, permanently." The word permanently sat in the middle of the table like something solid. My son looked at me. "Dad, we didn't sign anything." "No," I said. "You didn't." Her father said sharply, "Then there's no issue." "Not yet," I said. "But I had a call this morning from Harriet. She tells me that an inquiry was made to the county assessor's office about this property on Friday by someone using a law firm in Denver associated with your company." He went still. "Now, I don't know exactly what that means yet," I said. "Harriet is looking into it. But I thought we should all be aware of what we're talking about before this conversation went any further." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. My son's mother-in-law was looking at her husband. Her husband was looking at the table. My son was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was about 9 years old, and had broken my shop window with a baseball and wasn't sure if I knew yet. I knew. I looked at my son. "You didn't know about the inquiry." It wasn't a question. I could tell from his face. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, and then, quietly, "I didn't." Something in me loosened slightly, just slightly. Her father said, "That inquiry was routine due diligence. Nothing more." "Due diligence for what?" I said. "On whose behalf? You don't have any standing with respect to this property. You have no legal relationship to it whatsoever." He started to say something else. I stopped him. "I'm going to ask you and your wife to go back to your hotel," I said. "I'm going to ask you to drive back to Denver tomorrow. And I'm going to ask you not to make any further inquiries into my property, my finances, or my affairs of any kind. If you do, Harriet will know about it, and she will respond accordingly." Her mother said softly, "We were only trying to help." I looked at her. I thought about my wife sitting in the living room, holding a floor plan of her own home with her hands shaking. "You were not trying to help," I said, "and I think you know that." They left within the hour. My son stayed. We sat in the living room, me in my chair, him on the couch where his mother had been sitting the day before. My wife had gone for a walk. She does that when she needs air. "I want to tell you something," I said, "and I want you to hear me." He nodded. "I know your in-laws have a way of making things seem like their idea when they're partly yours. And I know it's hard to push back on people who feel like they hold a certain power in your marriage. I paused. But you're my son, not theirs. And when you walked into this house with a plan that involved pushing us out of it, even if you didn't know all the details, you made a choice. He looked at his hands. He's had his mother's hands his whole life. I've always noticed that. I know, he said. What are you going to do about it? He looked up. What do you mean? With them? With your wife? With the fact that you let this get to the point where your mother was sitting alone in her own living room crying over a floor plan of the house she's lived in for 3 decades? My voice didn't waver. I'd had time to think, and I wasn't angry anymore. Just clear. What are you going to do? He sat with that for a long moment. I don't know how it got this far, he said finally. Her dad started talking about the property value a few years ago, and it felt abstract, and then it felt like a plan. And then I was in it before I realized I was in it. That's not an excuse. No, he exhaled. It's not. Your mother and I built this life. We built it ourselves over a long time with a lot of work. And I'm not ready to give it away, and neither is she. When we are ready to make changes, if we ever are, we'll make them. On our terms. Do you understand? Yes, and I need you to understand something else. I leaned forward slightly. I love you. That doesn't change. But I am not someone you can maneuver. I am not someone who'll quietly go along because it's uncomfortable to push back. I've been watching this situation develop for longer than you know, and I've been patient. But there is a limit. He didn't say anything. But something in his face shifted. Some tension that had been there all morning, maybe all year, moved out of it. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. Tell your mother that, I said. She's the one who deserves to hear it. When my wife came home from her walk, she found her son waiting by the front door. I watched from the kitchen doorway. He took her hand and said something I couldn't hear. She listened. After a moment, she nodded and then she put her arms around him and held on. I turned back to the counter, made myself a fresh cup of coffee. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't think anyone does. But I know what this house sounds like at 6 in the morning, when the light comes through the kitchen window at that angle that makes the whole room gold. I know where the hollow spot is in the hallway floor, the one I keep meaning to fix, and probably never will. I know which drawer in the bedroom sticks in August when the humidity comes. Harriet called me back that afternoon. The inquiry to the assessor's office had been made without any legal authority behind it. Nothing had been filed, nothing had been transferred. The trust was intact. You're fine, she said. I know, I said. I was always going to be fine. She laughed a little. Most people aren't that confident. I've been planning for this for 12 years, I said. I just hoped I'd never need to use it. After I hung up, I walked out to the side yard, where my wife's roses were still holding on, just barely, against the October cold, the red ones her mother had given her. The yellow ones she'd started from a cutting. The little white ones along the fence that neither of us could remember planting, but that came back every year without being asked. I stood there for a while, just looking. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere.